The PS2 was such a great console both then and now. With so many great games, it's easy to forget that the PS2 was a great machine for arcade games. Since I love arcade games, probably as much as I love the PS2, I figure I would go over some of the best arcade games you can play on the good old PS2, with a caveat. I won't be covering compilation discs, but maybe I will in a separate video, so let's go. We start things off with 18-Wheeler, a Sega classic arcade game that places you behind the wheel of a big rig. Now I typically don't like racing games, but this one is a bit different in that you aren't racing against several other vehicles in some slick car. You are driving a big rig and there's much more to it. For example, you must shift your truck's gears to make it go. It's a concept that is probably lost on some modern gamers if they don't know how to drive a stick shift, but I found it added a sense of realism to this arcade classic. The game's premise is really quite simple. You pick a driver and haul items across the country before your time limit expires. It's a lot easier said than done because your rival, who is a maniacal motorist, is constantly getting in your way. He always seems to get ahead of you unless you make good time by avoiding cars and entering into these speed boosts called slipstreams. You go from checkpoint to checkpoint and hope that you can get there before the time expires. If you crash your big rig into certain cars, you get extra time. While playing this game, there were many times that I missed checkpoints by mere seconds and had to restart the level all over again. It was frustrating and made me want to rage quit, but then I had to remind myself that this is an arcade game and it's designed to take your quarters. The good thing here is that it's on the PS2 and there are no quarters involved. Needless to say, I couldn't stop playing this game as the gameplay is so addictive. But man oh man are some of these tracks brutal. Be prepared to be frustrated, if you aren't an arcade gamer that is. I love me some rail shooting, and Vampire Hunter brings the arcade rail shooter to the good old PS2. The story is not complicated at all. You play as a vampire hunter who must take out the creatures of the night. No gun con? No problem. You can play this game with a controller as I did. But I will say though that it's probably a lot more fun with the gun con. This game has shades of other horror-themed rail shooters, namely House of the Dead. You fight in various stages, taking out vampires and other monsters, and boss characters. You must be good at reloading your gun or get smoked during your playthrough. This game isn't too difficult, although there are some shots that you must take to free innocent people who turn into monsters if you don't hit their weak spots. There's this girl who tags along annoyingly, but she's harmless. She's more of a distraction than anything. The cutscenes in this game are done well, but I have to say that the voice acting needs a bit of work.
As might have been expected of a vampire hunter.
Wonderful. What interesting experimental material they are.
As expected, not bad.
It's not a deal breaker though, it's just really cheesy. This game isn't too difficult at all, but it's a lot easier with another player. You can set the number of credits to start with, but once they are done, the game is over. Which to me sucks because if you have enough coins in the arcade, you can continue the fun. At any rate, this is a great arcade game on the PS2. Let's talk about Gauntlet Dark Legacy. Anyone who grew up playing the OG Gauntlet in the arcade is probably familiar with this timeless classic. I used to play the OG Gauntlet back in the day in the arcades, and it was a unique experience because it was the first game that I ever saw in the arcades in which you could play with 3 others. Gauntlet Dark Legacy takes everything you love from the Gauntlet games and gives it that 3D makeover, and man oh man is it an awesome experience. Gauntlet is basically a game in which you run around, shoot monsters and monster generators, and find your way out of the level. Along the way you will find crazy amounts of treasure and magic items that grant you powers such as 3D vision, rapid fire, and many others. During your playthrough you will be doing a lot of backtracking because the game is chock full of little secrets and items that you will want to get. This game looks and plays beautifully on the PS2 and is every bit as worthy as its arcade namesake. You get to choose from a variety of characters, each with their own special abilities, and you get to unlock other characters by playing more of the game. This game also has an RPG element and you can level up your characters while you play. I played mostly as a warrior in this game and you can switch characters on the fly, but there is an issue with that. All of the level progress that you achieved with one character does not carry over to a fresh character. And so you will have to do the levels over again with the new character. It's not a deal breaker, but it just makes you want to play with a pal or two to run through the game together. The enemies and boss fights in this game reflect the worlds that you fight in. Each world has several stages of fun for you to take on, and each adds a nice change of pace. Gauntlet Dark Legacy is a game that also has stellar music, and I was really surprised. Have a listen. game's graphics and sound effects, especially the voice of the game's narrator, are also impressive. If you want an awesome arcade experience on the PS2, look no further than Gauntlet Dark Legacy. Up next is Arctic Thunder. I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised with this game, as I'm really not a fan of racing games. But this one is so much more. I mean, what's not to like about racing and snowmobiles? This game is quick, and part of the fun is using the various power-ups in the game to gain the upper hand on your fellow racers. When you are not armed with some power-up, you can punch your fellow racers, which reminded me quite a bit of the Road Rash games. This game lets you race in different tracks like Chernobyl, the White House, and several others. The game also has tons of tracks that you can unlock as you play. Let's talk about the game's characters. There are tons of them, and each have their own pros and cons. You unlock the secret characters by winning races and accumulating points. This game has a lot of replay value and contains different modes including race, head-to-head, arcade mode, and several others to keep you interested. The controls of the snowmobiles vary depending on what character you choose. It wasn't a pain to control the snowmobiles with any of the characters, but the controls could have been a bit tighter. At any rate, this game is fun to play if you have some time to kill and want a game without investing a lot of time. That's the beauty of the arcades after all, and Arctic Thunder does not disappoint. Have you played this game? Finally, let's talk about Marvel vs. Capcom 2. This is probably one of the best fighting games in the arcades and definitely one of the best on the PS2. What's not to love about a mashup of Marvel's greatest heroes and villains and favorite characters from the Capcom universe? This is a tag team type one-on-one fighting game that takes getting used to if you're an old school Street Fighter 2 player like I am. I know it took me some time getting used to the game's mechanics. You choose a team of 3 characters to take on another team of 3, and the gimmick here is that you can swap out your characters and use them for tag team attacks on the fly. It can be confusing though, especially if your opponent is using the same characters. But this of course doesn't get in the way of the fun. Certain button combinations will allow you to do special attacks, and some of them are downright impressive. I have to admit, I didn't play this game the way I normally play fighting games. It was more of a button mash than a calculated timing-based attack that I was using. But you know what? That's why this game is so appealing, because although it does help knowing how to attack and use the characters in conjunction with one another, you can easily win by just button mashing. It keeps the casual gamers interested and the purist entertained. The character selection is so-so from the start, but then you get to unlock several other characters to add to the fun. As you guessed it, the graphics and sound are both top-notch and mirror the arcade version quite well. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is one of these timeless arcade games that brings people in for some fun, and is a game that you can play for an hour or two, enjoy it, and move on with the rest of your day. Here are some other great arcade games you can play on the PS2.
There's the pitch. Strike 2. Final round. Fight.
And that's going to be it for the Big Retro Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment, and leaving a like. And I will see you next time on the Big Retro Show.